Welcome to Smex Ed. Class is in session.
I'm your host, Amanda King, and I'm here to teach anybody who wants to fucking listen how to have the audacity to say fuck it to societal standards and live their most authentic life. This podcast is dedicated to bringing the sexual conversations we have behind doors onto the main fucking stage. Because sex, masturbation, squirting, guess what? It is all normal. And by bringing these conversations to the forefront, we help people feel less alone in this world. We help them feel safe. We help them gain their power back. We help them step into their confidence and express themselves sexually in this world unapologetically. Because it takes fucking audacity to be your truest self. And we have a boatloads of audacity all up in this bitch. So let me ask you this. Are you ready for some epic shit?
Hello, everybody. I know this is hitting the podcast a little late today, and I apologize. I don't know if you can tell, but I am extremely congested. I woke up with a head cold this week, and so I've been falling a little bit behind, and this is going to be a shorter episode, but I want to discuss the glorification of marriage and long-term relationships. And you're probably like, what the absolute fuck is she talking about? But I've had numerous conversations about this topic over the last few months, and they just keep kind of circling back. And so I think that we should talk about this on a podcast episode because I have friends who are single, and I have friends who are married, and I have friends who are in long-term relationships. And there seems to be this idea amongst the single crowd that once they find a partner, whether it is for a long-term relationship or that they are going to get married or are married to, they believe that that's when shit gets easy. And when, in a way, the work stops. And I think this is so unjustified for single people. And I was having a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who is married, and she said, no one prepared me for what marriage actually is. And I think that that's such a bold, true statement because no one really does prepare you for what marriage is or even how much work goes into a long-term relationship. A lot of single people think, oh, well, the dating is the hard part. And then when I find that person, it's all going to be rainbows and sunshine and a cakewalk. And it's like, that's not where the work stops. That's where the work begins. And it's not your fault, right? Because marriage and long-term relationships are often glorified in media as this like happily ever after, right? We all grow up watching the same goddamn Disney movies that are twisted in their own right, but they all teach us that we are supposed to find our person, the one, which is another stupid notion I don't believe in. And then that is supposed to be who we spend our life with, and it's supposed to be easy. And no one prepares you for the fact that if you are in a long-term relationship or you are getting married, it is a lot of fucking work. I had a woman, a comedian, I can't think of her name. I saw a video she was doing on TikTok and she summed it up so fucking perfectly. And she said, everyone thinks that the work is over when you get married. She's like, it's like a sprint to get married. And then when you look at people who finish sprints, right, they're energized, they're excited, they're ready to go. And she said, a marriage is like a marathon. Do you ever see people at the end of a marathon? They can barely walk. They're exhausted. They don't even know who their name is. And she said that so many people run to the altar to want to get married and they sprint there and they don't realize the marathon that comes afterwards. And anytime that you are in a long-term relationship, it is going to require an insane amount of work. And I use the word insane very intentionally, not over dramatically, because when you are with another person for a long time, things start to, I don't know, dwindle, things start to get tough, obstacles start to come in your way, and you're in it with them. right? To an extent, and yeah, divorce is an exit route, but there aren't a lot of exit routes once you say, yes, this is the person I'm committing to for the rest of my life. And I think that a lot of single people don't recognize the responsibility that comes with marriage and or long-term relationships because quite frankly, no one discusses it. And so I want to just discuss how fucking hard it is to be in a long-term relationship and have a realistic conversation on it because it is work. Last week, I did an episode on the decrease of sexual intimacy in long term relationships. So, this is kind of following the same theme of that, where it's like when you're in a long term relationship versus dating, when you are dating, everything is brand new. Everything is exciting, right? Both of you are excited by each other. Your sex drive is an all time high because you're getting to learn each other, you're getting to know each other. Everything is new and adventurous and spontaneous. When you enter a long term relationship, that's not how it is. Once you start recognizing that it's this one person that you're continuously being with, you start to lose sight sometimes of a lot of things. You start to lose sight of how much that person takes care of you and how much you take care of that person. You start to unconsciously take advantage of or take that other person for granted. And they do the exact same thing for you because you know at the end of the day, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, that person is there until the end, or you hope that they are. And so with long-term relationships, there is a decrease in not only intimacy a lot of the times, but not even sex, sorry, but intimacy and connection. And in order to maintain that intimacy and connection, you have to put in a lot of fucking work. Because when you are with someone over a long span of time, we as human beings evolve on a, what's the word, an individual level. For example, if you were not who you were 3 years ago, like just stop and think of who you were 3 years ago. You weren't, you today are not who you were a year ago. You today are not who you were yesterday. Every single minute of the day, we evolve as human beings. We make mistakes, we succeed, we fail, we do great things, we do bad things, we learn lessons from all of it, and we evolve every single moment of the day. In long term relationships, it's all about evolving together and not evolving apart because that tends to happen when you are with the same person for a span of 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You want to know why there is such a high increase in divorce rates? There's a few reasons. Number one, when we came up with the concept of marriage and death to you part, we were all dying at the age of 35 to 40. So it really meant you just got to suck it up for about 5, 10 years. One of you is going to pass and then you're going to have the opportunity to be with someone else. And that's more, that sounds morbid, maybe fucked up, but that's the truth. When marriage was created, it was created as a, it wasn't even based off of love. It was for political gain or societal gain, and women were sold as property. It was, the idea of marriage is glorified in general, but when you sit here and look at it and realize that like people back then were only living to 35, 40. Their life expectancy was so much smaller than ours is today. So when we look at marriage and we look at death to us part, being 40 to 50 years, if you want to stay with your partner that long, it requires an enormous amount of work. And that's why a lot of people don't stay together that long, because over the span of a few years, you change, you shift, you evolve, you grow, and couples tend to grow apart. And it's not anything that people do intentionally. This is kind of what happens. And this was a conversation I was having with a girlfriend yesterday, is what ends up happening is you get so used to each other's presence that these little things start happening, because it's never these huge big things. I don't want to say never. It's ultimately typically 1,000 small things that end up breaking up a relationship. But what ends up happening is there's 1,000 small things. And rather than sitting here and addressing them or discussing them with your partner, we all start to internalize them. we start to think to ourselves, well, I don't want to pick this fight today. I don't want to talk to him about this today. I don't want to talk to her about it. And so we just button it inside. Or it's something where we feel that we have mentioned multiple times to a partner and they're not hearing us and they keep constantly repeating their actions over and over again. And so what happens is we stop saying it, we stop communicating, and we start internalizing. What happens when you internalize your feelings and you don't express them? Resentment, bitterness, hate, anger, because you feel in that relationship that you are no longer seen, valued, or heard. You start to recognize that you are taking advantage of this person and being taken advantage of. And so communication completely breaks down in relationships. And this tends to happen at a lot of really heavy obstacles in life. And it can be something that's very minor that blows up and turns into something quite large, or it can be something that is quite huge, that rather than discussing it and trying to move through it together, you both decide in that moment, let's just keep it quiet and just try to get through this. And that lack of communication inevitably brings the relationship to its knees because you're no longer talking about the things that are affecting your relationship. You're just trying to survive, and get by and just, what is it, brush it or sweep it underneath the rug. Marriage and long-term relationships are fucking work. They require two people to step outside of themselves and put aside their egos in order for the common good, which is the duration or the strength or the longevity of the relationship. When you're in a relationship, if ego takes over, it becomes this, I always need to be right. And so I will wait till I'm right to then take that as a weapon against my partner. You start weaponizing your emotions, your feelings, all of it. You start weaponizing their words. Your words get weaponized against you. And like I said, this isn't anything that consciously happens in a relationship. It's just when you were with someone for a long duration of time, things are going to start to annoy you that used to not annoy you. Even I remember I had this best friend in college, and when we lived apart, we were amazing. We were always having fun. We loved hanging out with each other. The second we moved in with each other, it was just like, oh my God, I cannot be in the same space with this person anymore. We already spent all of our time together. And then now we're in this living situation together. Everything she did annoyed me, and everything I did annoyed her, right? The way she would leave the pans out, or the way I would not do the dishes, or whatever it was. It was this little thing that just kept eating at our friendship, eating at our friendship. And once again, it's not anything consciously that we do, but when you are in a close proximity with one other person for a long duration of time, there are going to be little pet peeves that start really digging at you. And when we sweep them underneath the rug, we don't discuss them, and all of a sudden those little pet peeves start fucking compiling. And all of a sudden they have this snowball effect that ends in a argument over something so stupid that has nothing to do with the actual argument. And this is when it's something so small. There was a movie, I think it was called The Breakup, with Jen Aniston and oh my God, Vince Vaughn. And the fight starts off of something so stupid. I can't even remember what it was about, but it escalates and they end up breaking up. And it's not that they didn't love each other. It's just all of these little things kept compiling because they weren't communicating. And that happens all of the time in long-term relationships. Long-term relationships are fucking work. It is, once again, two people stepping outside their ego. And rather than sitting here and saying, I need to be right in this moment, it's more about, okay, I want to be right. I don't need it. And I need this relationship to work. I want this relationship to work. So, how can I just put my ego in a closet right now and figure out how to make this situation better? Rather than sitting here and saying, I am right, and you need to admit that you were wrong and you need to apologize. Sometimes just sitting there and being like, let's just fucking talk this out. I have flaws, you have flaws, but we need to have this discussion because I don't want this to turn into something 20 times worse. Long-term relationships are fucking difficult. And if you are single out there, I'm not trying to scare you, right? I'm not trying to sit here and say single forever, but I have so many people and so many friends who say shit like, "Oh my god, being single is so hard and dating is so hard." Yeah, dating is hard. It's complicated, especially nowadays with online dating. I could not imagine. Like, it's probably fucking terrible. But at the same time, don't think that once you get into a long-term relationship, it is easy peasy lemon squeezy from here. It's not, because you have to sit there and actively work with your partner in order to evolve. And this, even like, let's bring it back to sex. What ends up happening in long-term relationships? Like, I even had a girl, I was at a bar a few weeks ago, and I said something that I had sex with my partner 3 times in the week, like consecutively. I'd had sex with him 3 days in a row. And I had mentioned it, and she goes, "Oh, what? Is that a long time? Is that like, do you not have sex that often?" And I said, "Well, I mean, it really depends. It ebbs and flows." And she's like, "Well, I don't think that's a lot of sex." I'm like, "Okay, that's great." In my head, that's a good amount of sex for a person who's been in a relationship for 10 years with the same person. And so it's how we perceive it as well, right? So when we end up getting into a relationship that's long term, sex does require a little bit of work. Spontaneity sometimes is not a thing, it's a thing of the past, right? Especially if you're in a long term relationship with a partner and you have children, or you have commitments, or you have animals, you have whatever it is. Sometimes you have 2 jobs, everyone is fucking busy all the time. And so these little things like sex tend to take the back burner of a lot of relationships, in long-term relationships, because other things become a priority. So what ends up happening is, once again, we all take each other for granted, not like consciously. And then we start losing intimacy and connection, because those times where we would spend cuddling on the couch together are now filled with engagements and events, or babysitting, or being with our kids. The lack of time that two people, the amount of time that two people in a long-term relationship have together sometimes decreases. And you think, why would it decrease? We're with each other all the time. Yeah, well, you both start leading your lives, and you both have possibly children, and you both need to put your shit on the back burner for everybody else. And therefore, you actually end up sometimes spending less time with your partner than you did dating. Because when you were dating, it was just you two, and it was all new and it was fresh. And so you made you two a priority. And sometimes in long term relationships, people stop making their significant others a priority. Once again, not something that anybody consciously does. It just fucking happens. And that's why I just wanted to get up here and talk about this, because I think that we romanticize, maybe not glorify, but we romanticize long term relationships and marriage as this like happily ever after till death do us part. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be easy. It's not. And I will say something, I don't know if this is a side note or tangent, but if you think that marriage is going to change your partner, that's a fucking lie. Just because someone is committing to you for a marriage does not mean that their personality shifts 180 degrees. I see so many people get into marriages where they think, oh, well, their boyfriend's a lazy sack of shit, but once we get married, he's going to help out more and he's going to be more present with the kids. No, he's not. If he was a sack of shit before you got married, he's going to be a sack of shit after you get married. Marriage does not make people better. Marriage is, that's not what marriage is. Marriage is a commitment from one person to another, but each of those people are also committing to evolving on an individual level as well as evolving as a couple. Both of those people are committing to putting the work forward and the effort forward, because let me tell you, it requires so much effort to be in long term relationships. It requires a level of vulnerability in relationships that you, in long term relationships, that you don't really feel 6 to 8 months into a relationship. Sometimes you don't even feel it for 2 years into a relationship. It's these questions and these concerns about finances, it's bills, it's of kids, it's fucking engagement and careers and everything, and events. It's all of this stuff that becomes so compiled onto the relationship and adds all this extra pressure that wasn't there before when you were single. And I just think that this needed to be an episode. Like I said, I don't mean to scare you into being single the rest of your life. And I'm fairly certain there are plenty of people here who are listening to this episode and they're like, oh, fuck that. Being single is so much worse. And you know what? The grass isn't always greener on either side, guys. Because there are people who miss being single and then they divorce and they hate being single. There are people who hate being single and then they get married and they wish they were single again. Like, it's not greener on the other side of the pasture. And I think that that's the whole point of this conversation in this podcast episode, is just to say, like, hey, listen, both sides suck. Don't expect your life to get better on either side. Recognize that this is all a individual journey. And what I mean by that is, you've got to be working on yourself the entire time that you are in a long-term relationship. And you also have to open that communication up to your partner to say something like, we need to evolve together because I don't want to evolve apart. I had to have that conversation with my partner in like 2018 when I started my whole kind of self-help. I mean, like, I don't know, bettering myself type of journey, because he's a very pessimistic person and I'm a very optimistic person, and that pessimism, yeah, sure, was really bringing me down. And I had to have the conversation with him of, I don't want to evolve past you, I want to evolve with you. So I need you to work on yourself too, because this is really like negatively weighing on our relationship, because you're just so damn pessimistic about everything. And so he took that to heart and he attempts to be better every single day with it. But that requires a lot of work on his part when he wants to go into a rant because of something he saw on the news that I don't want to hear, because it makes me feel like shit hearing it too. It takes effort from both parts or both parties to try to make the other one feel more seen, heard, and valued. It takes effort. It is not just an easy pathway from the second you get married until the second you're no longer married. It is not linear. It is all over the fucking place, and it is a rough terrain. Is it worth pursuing? Absolutely. Because if you find that person who makes you feel good and makes you feel seen and loves you unconditionally and puts your needs not above their own, but at the same level, then it is absolutely worth putting the effort in. But it is effort. And I guess that's all I wanted to say today on this episode, is to my single people who are out there. Society romanticizes a lot of aspects of life, to each of us. And I think, as someone who has been married for 5 years now and with their partner for 10, that I would have had a more realistic discussion of what marriage is for me and how much work being in a long term relationship requires. And as I was sitting across having coffee yesterday with a woman who was like 10 years probably younger than me, also married, just had a kid, and she's sitting here telling me how difficult her marriage was and how hard it was, and no one had said anything to her either. And so when she got married, she was not expecting um what actually is marriage. And I thought this was just a really, I don't know, needed conversation to educate our listeners on the fact that all marriages and long-term relationships require work. And if you are sitting here and you're single and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to be in a long-term relationship, that's great. Make sure you get into the long-term relationship with the right person, not just a person, not just anybody, not just some like person who only checks like a couple boxes, right? Someone who you know that you can honestly see yourself sitting there, and in the darkest of times, the most turmoil bullshit, you can still feel like you can talk to that person and that you would want to make an effort with that person. Don't just be jumping into relationships for the sake of being in relationships. And I notice this especially as women get older, because as men get older, it's seen attractive that they're still single, right? Like George Clooney, he's such a bachelor. Oh my God, that's so amazing that he's single at like 40 plus. But then as women get older and they wonder why the woman's still single, they're like, oh, she's 40. Why is she still single? I don't understand, right? There's something wrong with her. And so I see in a lot of women, they want to jump into relationships in order to avoid being seen in that stereotype. And it's like, hold the fuck out for the right person rather than just jumping into a relationship with anybody just for the sake of saying I'm in a relationship, because it is fucking work and it requires a lot from each party, and you want to make sure that you're entering that with the right person. So yeah, I'm going to cut this one short today because I'm not feeling well. But if, as always, if you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share this podcast episode. Go review us on iTunes if you like it. If you have any feedback on this episode, you want to add your 2 cents, feel free to DM us and to at SmexEd at my personal platform, and just let us know how you feel about this. Like I said, and as always, I don't know, like, I don't know, I feel like this should be part of the intro that I preface this. These are my personal opinions, views, and beliefs. If you do not agree with them, that is completely fine. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. This is not fact. This is not studies. This is not science. This is just how I feel. And so recognize that if I say something in these episodes that trigger you in some sort of way, that this is just personal opinions or beliefs, and this isn't meant to attack anybody, or it's not meant to, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not meant to make you feel bad. It's just meant to offer you insight on something that you may not have insight on, or that some people may not just be discussing. So as always, like I said, this is my personal opinions, beliefs. Please feel free to listen or say fuck off. Like, honestly, it's up to you if you want to take this to heart or not. But after being with someone for so long, I just think that we need to have these conversations of like the bright sides of relationships, which are great, but also there are negative aspects of long-term relationships that we should discuss, so that as a society, when we run into these negative aspects, we don't feel alone. And we don't feel like, oh my God, we're the only couple going through this. No, there are 1,000 other couples going through exactly what you guys are going through. So you're not alone. And I think that that's the biggest thing I just wanted you to know in this episode. So I love you guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to Smex Ed with Amanda.
And some parting words for you today. Remember this: no matter how hard society pushes you down, no matter how many times you fall, as long as you get the fuck back up, they can never stop you. You are unfuckable with. You will win. Don't allow this world to dictate how you show up in it. Don't allow society to make you bend the knee. Instead, make them bend theirs. And don't forget, if you like what you heard, go on to iTunes and Spotify and leave your girl a review. Until next time, my beautiful people.